Hello everyone, I'm Adam Ebert and welcome to Can I Teach It, a show that explores the teachability of pop culture across mediums. Today's episode is on the Disney Plus series, Loki.
This book is filled with beautiful prose. This film's third act's a bit on the nose. This album features just one hit, but can I teach it?
With me, Mr. Ebert. For starters, Loki as a figure in general has his origins in Norse mythology, naturally, and that goes back thousands of years. However, the character of Loki made his Marvel Comics debut in 1949 in Venus #6 from creators Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby. However, that iteration is not the Loki we know and love. The most famous version of Loki debuts in 1962 in Journey into Mystery number 85. From that same creative team of Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby. Over the years, this iteration of Loki has squared up with his adopted brother Thor, Spider-Man, the X-Men, and the Avengers. This Marvel Comics character has had many unique variations over the years, with my personal favorite being Kid Loki from the Young Avengers series by Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey. In 2011, actor Tom Hiddleston brought the character of Loki to life on the silver screen in the film adaptation of the Thor comics. It is a star-making turn that puts Loki into the spotlight in a big bad way for a long time. The next year, 2012, Loki is the main villain in the first Avengers film, again allowing Hiddleston to shine in the role, solidifying Loki as one of the most popular characters in Marvel Comics and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. After several other film appearances, Loki meets his end at the hands of Thanos in Avengers Infinity War. But a past version appears in Avengers Endgame, which leads us to the Disney Plus series. So, with that brief context, let's talk about how would you teach it? For this episode on Loki, I will be sticking to one primary option as to how you can teach it. Taking a look at the series so far and the potential for writing curriculum that utilizes it, I really see one way that you can go about bringing this series into your classroom. Therefore, the first and only option for this episode is a piece that I'm calling, Tell Me About Your Variant. So, in the first episode of Loki, the character is caught by an organization called the TVA, or the Time Variance Authority. That's a governing body that polices the time and reality of the entire Marvel Universe as we know it. Based on his actions in Endgame, a version of Loki created a branch timeline, or a universe parallel to the primary Marvel Universe. Therefore, he is labeled as a variant, essentially an alternate version of the character we saw in films like Thor: The Dark World, Thor: Ragnarok, and Avengers Infinity War. About halfway through the first episode, Loki is shown a range of other variants by the TVA, and they range from the outlandish Loki to the mythologically accurate Loki.
We're looking for a Loki, a variation of this guy, a type we should all be very familiar with because the TVA has pruned a lot of these guys, almost more than any other variant. And no two are alike. Slight differences in appearances, or not so slight. Different powers, although powers generally include shape-shifting, illusion, projection, and my favorite, illusion projection.
I would start this lesson by discussing questions like, how do the choices we make help shape who we are? How do aspects of our identity shape the decisions we make? How do our decisions and actions affect others? How can our decisions affect the world around us at large? These bigger questions, these essential questions, provide a nice foundation for students and get them to reflect on the bigger ideas of the lesson from the get-go. From there, show your students the first episode of the show for context, if time permits. You could also get away with a couple of key scenes that really focus on the premise of the show and the writing assignment at large. If you think students might be wholly unfamiliar with Loki, Disney Plus has some short summary videos for the characters featured on their shows. After showing your students some form of the first episode and making sure they understand the gist of variants and parallel universes, have them reflect upon a major decision they made. Now, this can be hard even with older students in high school, but they can also look at some of the smaller and more trivial yet personal decisions that they've made, tracking the small effects that the decision may have had on their life at large. Now, the key assignment for this lesson is as follows. Your students will write about a variant or version of themselves that made a different decision than one they made in real life. The version of Loki that we're watching on the show is a variant of the main character that fans got to know and love over the course of several films. And you're essentially having students create something similar. Students should be able to choose a key decision that they made in their young lives and write about a world where they made an alternative decision. On a potentially large scale, they will create a narrative that centers around the world created by a version of themselves making a completely different decision than the one they made in the past. How might a different choice change them as an individual? How might a different choice change the people and the world around them? This is what they must consider as they are planning and writing. You can have students write a narrative with a traditional structure, an expository text detailing this new world, or perhaps an epistolary text detailing the correspondence of this variant version of them. This writing assignment allows students to reflect on the impact and consequences of the decisions they've made on their lives and identities, looking outside of the box, outside of their current selves, and really considering the effects of decisions both big and small. Social emotional learning is incredibly essential in today's education system, and this assignment prompts students to think about the effects of their decision making on a micro and macro level. An alternative option you can explore with your students is the opportunity to get both silly and creative. If students feel they haven't made any life and identity shaping decisions, any major decisions, you can also have them write about a variant of themselves in a much more creative fashion. Perhaps they can write about a variant that's a professional athlete, or a famous movie star, or queen of the universe. All while exploring how that version of the world and universe and themselves would play out. However, I really think leaning into real life decisions and alternate versions of themselves making different decisions can really be a powerful and effective lesson plan. So as you consider the option I presented, let's talk about whether or not you should teach it. So as for the question of should you teach it, I most certainly think you should. It's a fun little writing activity that has students reflect on how the decisions they make shape who they are and who they can become. It's also an activity where you can show your class just that first episode or a couple of key scenes from that first episode, so students can get the gist of the premise. Finally, I think it provides an amazing opportunity for students to be reflective about the long-term effects of their decisions, both big and small. As a greater emphasis is put on the social emotional learning that's taking place in our schools, this is a lesson that can meet many of those objectives while also allowing students to be creative. From there, let's wrap things up. So, quick plug, I am a founding member of LitX, an organization that helps educators teach multiple literacies along with providing professional development that centers around teaching with pop culture. We've been putting on some summer programming in the form of panels posted on the LitX YouTube channel. Some of the panels on the channel feature yours truly, as well as a range of professional creators and educators. I'll link the channel in the description below, as I think that a lot of what we've been putting together is most certainly worth a look. With all that, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel, as well as the LitX YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Adam Gort and on Instagram at Can I Teach It. But until next time, happy teaching.